Sure. So I think the question has to do with Palestinian traditions of resistance, which is kind of what I focus on a lot in my research and writing. And liberation struggles involve resistance. The Palestinians have been struggling in a nationalist struggle for a long time, and I think it's important to put right at the outset that it's not a religious conflict, right? Religion has deeply been entangled in it, but at its core, this is a nationalist conflict. It's two competing nations on one land, claiming one land, and the majority population of the land, the Arab population, has always felt that their right to self-determination has been sidelined and suppressed in favor of the other group's exclusive right to self-determination on the land. It really goes back to British colonialism because it was all made possible when the British took over the country in 1917. And so Britain controlled the country and governed the country, occupied the country for about 30 years. And during that time, the British colonial authorities kept the Arab nationalism at bay and facilitated Jewish nationalism, what's called Zionism. And a lot of that involved moving European Jews into the country. And the local population was vehemently, for the most part, opposed to this policy of the British favoring the Jewish national movement in the country, which in the year 1900, there was less than 10% of the country was Jewish. And by World War II, it had risen to about a third of the population was Jewish. And the majority of that growth was coming from European Jews coming to the country. And with the horrors of the Holocaust exposed after World War II, you had a massive global sympathy for this Jewish liberation movement, right? The urge to create a safe haven for the Jewish people after centuries of European persecution and one of the worst genocides in human history. The international community backed the Israeli claim, or the Zionist Jewish nationalist claim, and in the fighting that ensued, the majority of the Palestinian population was pushed off their land. Palestine, as the name, was removed from the map. Something like 400 or 500 towns and villages were wiped off the map, depopulated. And where did all the refugees go in 1948 when the majority of the Arab Palestinian population lost their homes? And they were pushed into Lebanon. There's refugees in Lebanon from 1948. There's refugees in Syria from 1948. They were pushed into what came to be called the West Bank. And they were pushed in what came to be called the Gaza Strip. So you had a big push of about 750,000 people at that time pushed from their homes and crucially not allowed to return. They were never allowed to return from the camps that they're in foreign countries, never allowed to return from the camps they're in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. And so you see all sorts of resistance. Going back to the beginning, Palestinians employed very liberal sort of nationalist kind of protest, organizing congresses and demonstrations and trying to meet with and influence foreign dignitaries. But also insurgency and armed struggle became a major vein of Palestinian struggle. Armed guerrilla movements based from outside the country, attacking, trying to liberate Palestine in the sort of the decolonial Marxist kind of nationalist model of revolutionary struggle. They never had a chance against Israel, and they were constantly beaten back and pushed further and further from their cause. And civil disobedience, nonviolent resistance, has been a major staple of Palestinian struggle from the beginning. Probably the very core of Palestinian struggle, which is something called samud, or steadfastness, holding steadfast to the land, just caring for that olive tree grove, just continuing to build and raise your family on the land against all kinds of pressures from the Israeli military, the state, the increasing settlers on the land trying to harass and push the Palestinians off their land. Just holding to the land is a kind of resistance, but also every textbook method of civil disobedience that you're aware of, forms of direct action, non-cooperation, so refusing to comply with military orders, resigning from offices related to the occupation, boycotting Israeli products and engaging in economic work strikes, withdrawing their labor power from the Israeli economy. And these sorts of struggle happened over years and years, and they ebb and they flow. But there's also been periods where the desperation has led to some to undertake, extreme acts of violence, like suicide bombing, what became a major Palestinian tactic in the 1990s and early 2000s. And since then, it's been very little armed struggle. Probably the main face of Palestinian armed struggle for the last 20 years has been in the form of these rockets that are these relatively low-tech rockets fired from the Gaza Strip as a way of armed struggle. And maybe some of the biggest, most inspiring, but also tragic cases of unarmed demonstration, unarmed protest, came in the Great March of Return in 2018, when Palestinian civil society, Palestinian political parties worked together to encourage the population to protest right to the gates, to march to the gates and demand the right to return to their lands. And the sniper fire, created thousands of amputees that are, in wheelchairs and missing limbs because they were shot down by snipers. Hundreds were shot and killed. And it sent, I think, a very dire message to the Palestinian people that even nonviolent, courageous nonviolent protest that involves incredible sacrifice is not going to get you anywhere. And one is just left with a constantly growing sense of pressure and desperation, I think, that leads to where we are now.
Mm-hmm.